Hi, everyone. My name is Igor Majo from Startup Macedonia. This is the deep dive and the second session for Oracle for Startups Western Balkan series. We are very happy to have you here. Just as we all know, in the Balkans, we are trying to be a bit late on everything. We are really appreciate all of you that are on time. We'll wait just 1 minute more so that others can join, and then go with the session. So if you haven't get your cup of tea or your drink, this is the time to do it. And we have a very interesting 1 hour ahead of us. I have my cup here, Alex and Bogdan as well, our experts for this session, and we'll be kicking in as we said, 1 minute. Very welcome for you to join us. If you have any questions at any point of time, you can do that in the chat section. So this will be a very technical session, and feel free to join at any point with the questions. Alex, Bogdan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we doing this?
Definitely.
before we go with the whole session, I would like to give the floor to our host and representative from Oracle, Mr. Victor Gianni. Welcome, and please give us some info about what will be happening today and the whole program, and why we are doing this with Startup Macedonia for the Western Balkans.
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. So I'm glad to be here in this session. I think it's the third in a row that we do with Startup Macedonia. And as I said several times in my previous chats with you, it is the time right now to really start involving in developing the world after this pandemic COVID time. For sure, the business is not stopping. For sure, the world is not stopping. So, and for sure, there are very juicy, if I can say so, very good opportunities for us to help around the communities, around our business, and to do something that will help everybody to thrive within these times. Now, when it comes to the challenges that now the business has, I can just reiterate what I said. So first of all, people want to have more control on their money, the way they spend, the way they invest. They would like to be innovative because we serve the customers of our customers usually. So the business is built like that by all the companies. So therefore, in order to be still successful, you need to invent. You need to be very agile and to transform yourself to cope with the pressures from the entire environment around. Other than this, you need to be very fast. Why is that? Because people will not wait months to get a solution and to really be taking a benefit out of that solution. So it is the right time now for companies which develop software, which develop application solutions, to rethink and to re-energize their way of doing the job. So if you look, let's say, from the latest thing that happens now with digitalization, which is at scale, practically everywhere we have a chance to deliver some solution for that. Now, when it comes to with collaboration with Oracle, why is that? Why it is, let's say, the right choice for you? Because we have solutions in our cloud that help you further develop your business. Either if we speak about development itself from tools that we can offer in our cloud. If you're familiar with Java, then we offer it into our cloud. If you're familiar with MySQL, then again, if you go after, let's say, solutions which can help you to leverage your, let's say, reporting stuff, we have already solutions in our cloud analytics, which you can plug directly in your solutions and immediately build up something for your customers. So in terms of speed, we offer you the best choice, because you have the right tools, the right usage, the right speed to deliver it to your customers. In terms of innovation, if you need something to add on top of your solutions, you will find in our cloud, because we offer in our cloud not only infrastructure, we offer solutions as a service that you can take a choice. We can offer you to infrastructure. So everything that you may consider in order to develop a solution for a customer is there. Yeah, if you have like a simple reporting or you have very heavy reporting, we can offer you automated data warehouses solutions, which are built in our cloud, and you can just use it for your existing needs or the customer needs. So I mean, name it whatever you, if you like artificial intelligence, we offer you solution on that direction. Machine learning, it is there. So, and when it comes to the security part, we build up actually the cloud with in-depth security starting from scratch. So from hardware to software and all around. So we have the security is the purpose of our generation to cloud solutions. So in a nutshell, what will happen today? We will show you how to make money with our solutions, how to use our cloud in order to be successful, what to do and how to do it. We will show you how we are doing it. Okay. I don't know what happens. I hear some echoes anyway, but you'll have the chance to really touch our cloud and understand how we can serve you better. So I wish you good luck for the coming session. There are more to come. We still have sessions to be developed, and there is no bad question if you want to ask. Maybe we are not fully prepared to answer, but if there is such a thing, we will come back to you with a proper answer. So wish you good luck with the current workshop and all the best, and looking forward to see what questions or things you would like to develop with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victor. As we said earlier in the beginning, this would be a more technical session. So for all of you that are in developing of technology products, I will and in the front of technical development, this would be exciting. For all the others, it would be a very interesting learning process. So thank you, Alex. Thank you, Bogdan, for joining us and for taking the time to kind of give us an insight of Oracle products and how actually they integrate into the Oracle for Startups. So Alex, Bogdan, welcome. The floor is yours. We can start with this session.
Thank you, Igor, for the very nice introduction. And I've learned the hard way, you need to hook your audience. You need to get their attention in the first 30 seconds. So we said it's going to be a technical. I don't want to scare you away with any PPTs. And this is the reason why I'm going to switch and show you this, right? So in this session, in the next 1 hour and probably 15 minutes, we are going to see more technical stuff, more consoles, and more, more pieces of code, if you want, or how you can deploy your on the topic of what we are doing today, building cloud native applications mostly. And we are going to have a very hands-on approach and a very practical approach. So this is why I will start with demo even before introducing myself, right? So the entire thing, everything you're going to see today is deployed in Oracle Cloud. This is something which you can replicate. At the end of this session, we are going to give you all the sources, all the artifacts, all the bits and pieces, if you want, in order to take the same steps, which are very well documented, and you can deploy in Oracle Cloud, can get started with Oracle Cloud, deploying microservices and things like that in your own rhythm, right? How does this sound? I think, Igor, you can, is it aligned with basically what we were presenting and we were planning?
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant.
Looking
Okay.
forward.
Then let's start with the demo, because everything is built around this demo. And no, we are not trying to enforce a Black Friday for cat food or something like that. We are not trying to sell anything. We are a cloud company mostly, and we are talking about technology. But what you see in front of you, it's basically a reference application. This reference application is fully functional. It's a polyglot application written in many languages. So basically, it doesn't matter if you know Node.js, if you're a programmer, if you're programming with JavaScript, doesn't matter what your skills are. You will have the option and you have the chance to take this code and take this application and review the source code and understand everything what is happening underneath. As you can see, it's fully functional. Let me show you, for example, it's an e-commerce. So there is even a fun story, you know, it's not, I have a typo here. This one,
Alex, do you have something with a microphone? We cannot hear you very well.
you cannot hear me now?
You're disappearing for some second. Maybe we can go for the polls
Okay.
first, and
What about now?
perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, we are going to have a video. Sorry for that technical issues. We are going to have a video later, and I was basically sharing my computer sound. That was the reason.
Hmm.
Okay, let me go back to the demo, and we are going to have some polls also for you. So I was saying this is Igor. Can you let me know when I stopped hearing myself? I mean, when you stopped hearing myself, me?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay, then again, this is a reference app. This is an application which you will have the chance to deploy. It's an e-commerce application. It's a fully functional website where we have modules, for example, like profile, right? So you can record, you can register your own account. You have a shopping cart. You have a catalog, for example, for different categories of products. I can go here and check, for example, what I have in dry food. Add those products in the shopping cart, and there are a lot of functionalities. So we tried with this reference application, although you know it's not an application which it is in production right now. We tried to build such a reference in which we put all the best practices when it comes to how to build a cloud native application. And this is why not only that we are giving you all the sources and all the artifacts and everything, we are having this session in order to explain what is the logic behind it, how the application was thought, what are the things you can use, and how you can start your your experience with both cloud native and Oracle Cloud, right? But of course, before jumping to the nice part, which is code, how you deploy, how you play with Kubernetes, what are the services in Oracle Cloud, we need to have a short introduction in order to have a level, to have a common level, or to have a good understanding of the basic things what we understand by cloud native. And this is why also we prepared some polls. And let me launch the first one. I hope you can see it. I'm going to leave it for a few seconds. So the first question, it really, it's helping us in order to understand what is your current understanding on what cloud native is. Please answer this as it's going to help us basically to guide our presentation and to focus more on the specifics which are interesting for you. Okay, some votes are coming in. Please don't hesitate to use the voting one, the voting poll. Great. I will leave it for a few seconds. Brilliant. It's very interesting. Whenever we launch this kind of polling, we have different we've got different results, and it helps us a lot to understand, what is the audience and where we should focus on. Okay, I'm going to end the polling now and share it with you. So it looks like the majority of the audience, they heard about the term, but they would not say they are very, confident when it comes to cloud native, or they don't have necessarily the very technical skills to speak about cloud native. This would be the first option when you turn on presenter mode, right? So cloud native is something which they heard, and this is basically why we should start, and this is why we will start with explaining what cloud native is. Demo time. We already had it. I hope you are hooked, and it's very important to understand that until the end of the presentation, we are going to get into the details. We're going to see the architecture of the application, how the application is built, how it is deployed, and how you can do the same thing using Oracle Cloud free trial account which you can register, and also login for Oracle for startups. But right now, I think after 15 minutes of since our start, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Alex Nego. I'm a solution engineering manager in Oracle, covering with the help of my brilliant team, Eastern Europe. Right? What we are doing, we are supporting customers and partners in their projects. We are offering technical guidance. We are there working hands-on with the technology, and of course, we have a lot of we have a lot of members in the team who are focusing on specific areas. Myself, I'm focused on automation, DevOps, and distributed systems. So if you're looking to build cloud native applications, we can always have a chat. But we have a lot of skills in our team, and we are happy to hear what ideas you have in order to support you and help you in this effort of developing. And I will ask also Bogdan to introduce himself.
Thank you, Alex. So first, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Bogdan Farca, and I'm a developer programs manager working for Oracle Digital EMEA. Well, this is kind of my dream job for me because I'm tasked with creating content and relevant journeys for developers and technical personas and ISVs. And I said that's the dream job because of my background. I started as a founder of one of the most interesting software development companies in Romania, like 15-20 years ago, which is a lot, I know. So after 10 years there with developing the startup until we kind of sold it. Then I worked for IBM and now Oracle, dealing with middleware, with technology, with cloud, of course, and interfacing with fellow developers and ISVs. So that's in a very small nutshell my background and why we're here. Alex, back to you.
Brilliant. Okay, we have a lot of content, so I will jump through these slides. Again, I will try to, to shorten the time we spent on the slides and move back to the console in our environment. But again, we need to have a common understanding. And there is an official definition. We speak about cloud native, and we have basically a standard definition in what cloud native is, but we always try to do things more simple and to be more appealing, right? And this is why, based on our experience, we came up with a much shorter with a much shorter definition. Okay, when you speak, cloud native is a huge term and it can have a lot of interpretations if you want, but we identified three main pillars. So cloud native, it's a development methodology. It's not a piece of tech. It's not something you buy and deploy. It's a development methodology, and it is designed with the cloud. We were not speaking about cloud native because before cloud public clouds appeared, right? It's built with the cloud for the cloud. Why for the cloud? Because public cloud has some obvious advantages, and this is there are a lot of discussions why you should deploy in public clouds, but the idea would be, okay, just taking an application and deploying it in cloud, it's not going to mean a lot, right? You need to take advantage of all the specificities of a public cloud, and this is why we are saying is developed for the cloud, that uses loosely coupled services that can scale. This is very important because when we are thinking about how to architect the software, this means a big change compared with the monolithic approach, let's say. And there are three main pillars, three main things which we identified that are common for cloud native applications, right? It's container based. So we are not talking about virtual machines. We are not talking about building a monolith and deploying it somewhere. We are talking about services which are distributed, and they are most of the time container based. It can be a serverless approach, and we are going to show what kind of serverless offering we have. But most of the time we are talking about container based, and here we are speaking about technologies like Docker, like Kubernetes, and so many others, right? So the main thing to remember when you're speaking about cloud native, 90% of the time it's container based. The second one, microservices. So we are not building a monolith, a huge application which is slowly released, if you want, or updated, which incorporates all the functionalities and everything. We are talking about building microservices which collaborates together in order to achieve the end goal, right? And this is part of the how we architect the application. And this is very important when we speak about cloud native, because we most of the time, and I think 90% of the time, we speak about microservices. And the third one is somehow about automation. Human error is possible, right? We are trying to get to a I don't know, to the highest level of automation possible. In Oracle Cloud, for example, we call this autonomous, right? We are calling them autonomous services. But most of the time, we are talking about CI/CD and implementing a pipeline in which you can automate tasks which are related with the integration of your code, with the release of your code, and the deployment of your code, right? So these are the three main pillars we identify. We can have a huge debate about if this is if this is an accurate description of what cloud native is. Again, it can take a lot of it can be changed it can be different from case to case. It can be different from one need to the other, but these are the most common things which we identified. And again, if there is someone you want to blame for this definition, it's me, because it's according to my experience, right? Before jumping further, let me launch another poll, because this one is interesting also, and it's related with your level of understanding and your level of exposure to technical stuff, let's say. So when I say cloud, you actually hear what? You are actually hearing services which are being offered by different cloud providers, or you are thinking about the, how you can take your code, deploy it, and things like that. And of course, there is also a high chance of rain. If I'm speaking about cloud, that can be the case also. I will leave it for 30, 40 seconds more. The results are coming in, and again, Bogdan, I think this is really interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. It's really what we wanted to see, really. So I like the audience today very much.
Yeah, and it helps us a lot, to understand exactly what we should focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2. This is the last chance. 1, 0. Oh, I hoped we will have a draw, but it looks like no, we don't have a draw in the end. I
No,
hope the results
it was
here.
close though.
Yeah. So when I'm saying cloud and you understand virtual machines running Linux, that's cool. It means you have a technical understanding of what cloud is. Also, Dropbox, Office 365, Google Classroom, and these kind of services are, again, cloud native applications built by the service provider and are offered to you. What is very important to understand, again, most of these applications, I'm not saying all of them, but most of these applications in the back, although you don't know the complexity of what is going on, those services are built using this, following this cloud native approach, right? Taking advantage of what the public cloud providers are offering. For example, Oracle is one of the few who are offering infrastructure services, platform services, and software as a service, right? It's fine. What we are going to focus on today is how to build such an application, how to put the technology at work in order to achieve something similar like what Dropbox is doing, Office 365, and things like that. Okay, let's jump through it. I'm not going to spend too much time over this one. This kind of shift and the way the way we approach building software is going to be very important. It's going to have implications on several layers, and I will ask Bogdan to cover this part.
Thank you, Alex. So this is really a very broad topic. I mean, development and operational considerations, it's something we could speak about like 2 hours only on this. But let's quickly go through it because it's important and we can at least point at some directions here. So if we want to summarize what happened during the major change in IT and development and operations lately, we will see something like this. We have basically 3 main pillars, 3 main types of architectural infrastructure we're seeing behind the applications that are being built or moved to the cloud right now. First, we have the good old monolithic applications, which we all know and love, or well, hate. And one could say, well, monolithic applications, that's last century, that's before cloud, right? Well, not so fast, because a lot of legacy applications are moved now to the cloud. We have what we call lift and shift. We basically move applications from on-premise to the exactly or similar architectures on the cloud, taking advantage of elasticity and low prices and security and everything. So we will see this kind of applications in the cloud. Some new applications will obviously be best served by a monolithic applications, especially in very specialized industry or with very specialized use cases. So, well, another kind of somehow monolithic applications are mobile applications, right? Which are arguably one of the well, biggest consumer of cloud services. Most of them are running on devices, and they are minimal or small monolithic applications there, because they are running on that device and are only consuming some cloud services or APIs. Well, here it's a lot of, it's a big discussion here. I think mobile applications are, if you want, mini monolithic applications. So we should not just say only the new and shiny architectures are represented in the cloud. We have the old monolithic approach kicking and alive quite well. And then the other two pillars are the microservices architecture, which Alex described before, and the new kid on the block, the serverless functions, which are even more disconnected, even more managed by the cloud provider, even more susceptible of being consumed very quickly and cost effective. So we've seen this shift, if you want. So we've migrated from monolithic, or we are migrating mostly from the old approach to loosely coupled components, or with components with no dependencies at all. We now create more versions of code with minor changes and release more often. We are not waiting for the next release next year. We can deploy a new version of the application or the new version of a component of our application several times a day. And players like, I don't know, Netflix are doing this all the time, right? Every day they have several releases for various components of their applications. But also startup times for the apps, for the components play now a critical role, as well. Applications are deployed and destroyed by orchestrators automatically, instantly, and at huge scale. So it's important how fast a component or an application is really starting. But also code complexity is reduced, because with microservices and especially with serverless, with functions, we are putting only the smallest parts of the functionality in one component, right? So the code is simple, is focused on just one task, and the integration is done elsewhere. So that's a good thing. Code complexity is our enemy when we try to be very agile and to develop things to market very fast. Or we have a huge turnaround in developers, and the code should stay clear, clean, and easy to be understood by the next batch of developers or whatever. Also, environments play less or no role on the applications. With microservices, we have Docker, we have Kubernetes or similar frameworks. And in the end, the actual environment is more or less a commodity. With functions, even more so. The whole environment is not really visible for the application owner, for the developer. It's managed by the provider. And well, for all of them, for all the three pillars, now with cloud we can pay what we use, not more, not well, less. So that's important from a cost perspective. I know we have a technical discussion, but nowadays the technical and the business parts of the business, well, of the whole application are very closely interlinked. So let's see quickly, side by side, different aspects we're mentioning here. So what this whole shift is meaning from a developing your code perspective. So the code in a monolithic application is tightly coupled. You can't make bad changes. Well, you can, but it's very hard, and you have opportunity to spot bugs and to spot especially different parts of the applications not working well together. You have, if you have the right tools, the right IDs, the right development methodologies, you will have the opportunity to run unit tests, integration tests, and you will, I hope, catch anything bad quickly before deployment. Now with microservices and serverless, which are loosely coupled components, there is no direct connection. And of course, there are development tools that are, well, helping us to achieve this integration. This is hard to test, and hard to test in each and every scenario that we could imagine or could happen in real life. So it's perfectly possible now to make a breaking change. So this is why microservices based applications are often delivered using some kind of stage deployment, what we call a canary deployment. And I will describe that a little bit later. And serverless code, on the other hand, does only one thing. So each server service is basically completely decoupled from the other. So if something fails, then it only affects that part. And if your glue application, which is using different services and serverless functions together to create some sort of high-level functionality, it's well written, then it will gracefully degrade to take into account the functions that are really not working or not working as they should. I mentioned before the startup overhead implication. So how fast an application is supposed to run from nothing to fully functional. In a monolithic scenario, an instance can run for months or years. There are core banking systems that are working from the 50s, right? More or less without being stopped. So the overhead of starting up the application or some components part of it is really insignificant compared to the lifetime of the instance. And for really costly things like starting a database connection is the database framework that is really managing that anyway, the connection pool and everything. Now microservices they run for hours, possible days before being restarted, moved to other nodes or updated or something like this. So the startup time impact is relatively small, except in one scenario when we need to do fast scaling. Like we have a spike in usage and we need to spin up rapidly more and more containers with the same microservices in order to handle the workload. So in that case, an application that is starting slow or too slow will impact the speed of scaling up, of adding instances. With serverless though, the problem is bigger because serverless is a call per instance affair. Each time we call or something is calling a serverless function, the application that is containing the serverless function image is starting and then closing. That's the nature of the business. So you really don't want a high cost process to be run each time at startup. And also another bad thing here, or something that we need to pay attention to is when connecting to a database, because there is no connection pool, because the code that is running is not living outside of that call, of that invocation. So if left unchecked, it can really hammer the database with too many connections. The architectural answer here is if your serverless thing code does need to talk to a database, or really anything else with a high cost at startup, it's best to use a microservice instead of the function, or in conjunction with your functions. And the microservice should handle the connection pooling, for example, for a database. Or maybe to use some other kind of service, like Oracle REST data services, or ORDS, which is a way to access an enterprise Oracle database using JSON and REST, and this is not consuming database resources. So it's easy to use in a serverless scenario. Now, from a delivery complexity point of view, monolithic applications are easy, are simple, because usually everything is packaged and ready for deployment in the same var file. You just upload to the application server, and then you do some manual work, and you test the integration, and you test that before actually going into production. So if you want to change something, you repackage everything and redeploy. Microservices are usually delivered via self-contained Docker images. So there are tooling to do that. There is a lot of automation around that, especially the CI/CD stuff Alex mentioned before. But for now at least, is not as simple and mature as building a var file. It's a little bit more involved, although the tools and techniques involved are maturing quite rapidly, and I think it will, at some point, not so far in the future, it will be easier to deploy and more secure to deploy than a monolithic application. With serverless, it's in a way easier. You do need to deploy to build and then deploy the serverless image, the function, and different providers have different approaches here, and they are not really compatible, but there are some similarities though. And of course, you need to keep track of your endpoints. You need to keep track of your code honoring the development contract, the API interfaces. But that's more on the development part and not on the delivery side, which is quite simple. You just deploy the serverless image to the provider. Code complexity, another subject that's important and very interesting. In a monolith, simply because it's all built in one instance, the code complexity can be very high, especially if you're managing all the session state and having to deal with deadlocks, with multi-threading, complex integrations with other parts of the enterprise, multiple versions of the base operating systems, and lots more considerations. So from this perspective, code complexity, the monolithic applications are by far your worst nightmare here. Well, I'm exaggerating, but not by much. Microservices, though, code tends to be relatively simple. Each microservice represents a specific capability, so the disconnection and the clarity of the code could be, at least in theory, way more specific. And connections between microservices are theoretically, and they should be very well documented and understood and tested. Also, with microservices, we have two kinds of well, parts, if you want. We have stateful parts, which are keeping state, which are not changing and needs to be saved to something, a database or to disk or to anything else really. And also stateless parts, which are easy because they are more or less the same. They don't care what user interacted with them and what's the history behind that. So the last one here for serverless, your code complexity is quite low because the code is focused completely on the implementation of that specific bit of business logic. You basically don't care in your code for a serverless function about anything else, like nothing, just to respect your contract, your API, and that's it. The provider does everything else for you. Now, the cost is obviously important. And here there are no very well clear recommendations, you know. But in general, the cost of a monolithic application tends to be very stable. You can tell in advance how much it will cost. So if your client or your business model is expecting to see yearly budgets approved and released well in advance, then a monolithic application could do the trick, you know, because you can actually limit that application to a very specific amount of cash to be consumed.
Bogdan?
And that's
Can I add something? Yeah, I would like to add something,
sure.
because this is a very interesting topic and you can spend hours talking about it.
I'm talking too much, I know.
But what we've seen and what we would like to share with you about what startups are doing, the main idea is, you know, startups, because they want to be agile, they want to release new features as, you know, the customers are asking for. They want to be competitive on the market by having the best solution, the best customer experience, but keeping the costs low, right? There are more and more startups are more and more interested about developing using microservices and serverless, and this is exactly what our application is. Our application is all about, right? How you can build applications, how you can have a reference app built using microservices and serverless.
Well, thank you, Alex. One last thing here. I mean, I have again many more things to discuss here, but let's look at scaling, and that's the last topic with this page here. So because scaling is one of the things that is really setting apart all those well, architectural choices. With a monolith, you need to create a new server instance when you need to scale, to add more processing power. And that could be either a physical server or a VM. And in the worst case, that requires a budget, that requires sourcing new hardware, then integrate that new server into the existing environment, install everything on it, and start it all up and be sure that it integrates well. So this is not non-trivial work, and this is there is human involvement usually. So that's costly and slow. Microservices, though, they can scale automatically, especially if you use an orchestrator like Kubernetes, for example. You tell Kubernetes what are the conditions that needs to be met in order to trigger a scale up or a scale down. For example, the CPU load could approach, I don't know, say 75% on the existing nodes. And if this is happening, the management layer will spin up new nodes and will distribute the load across all the new nodes. So this is automatic, this is fast, this is saving budget and time, and there is no human involvement needed. Serverless is even simpler. In theory, they are capable of massive scaling. You don't care as a developer or as a DevOps guy about scaling. The provider's framework will just take care of that automatically. You have 1 billion requests out of a sudden, they will scale up and cover this. but of course, providers, well, they do not have infinite resources available. So there are practical limits, of course. And in some cases, it will be limiting, but you need to understand the limits, and that's it. Basically, for serverless, that's all you need to do. So that's it with that. I will be happy to discuss it more, but let's keep it as short as possible. So here, well, another interesting topic, and as usual, adapting, well, cloud native is easier said than done, like with everything in the technology world, right? So there are hundreds, literally, of open source projects with dozens of categories. So in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation landscape, what we're seeing here are, like I said, hundreds of open source projects. So the freedom of adapting open source software turns into a nightmare with so many options, or could potentially turn into a nightmare. So in addition, the do-it-yourself approach by putting things, cobbling things together, and creating some sort of spaghetti architecture might also work against the initial goals you're looking at with cloud native, like cost reductions, agility, portability, scalability, and even worse, an open source project you actually use and you rely on could be killed later by the developers, or by lack of interest, or they would go in a different direction and lack features that are essential for what you want to build next. We in Oracle, we seek to solve these problems first by being an active member of the open source landscape and the CNCF community. So Oracle is a platinum member of CNCF, and we are also an active contributor to the code base of Kubernetes. So we're actively involved in building this technology and keeping it alive well, and following the strategic directions we're looking for. And we're, of course, building integrations for Oracle database, for MySQL, obviously, but also with monitoring and management, those parts of Kubernetes with a Grafana plugin, for example. Alex, if you could advance to the next slide.
This one.
Is not. Oh, okay. So it gets even better. So luckily we have now what we call a trail map, a guided roadmap that will help us, the developers and the architects, to get your development and operations team into this brand new cloud native world. So it will help you get through this. And let's dive into the 5 phases of this roadmap. So Alex, I think it's back to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Bogdan. So guys, I don't know how it looks for you, but when I started to, research and learn about cloud native, this scared me a little bit. And cloud native sounds amazing. There are so many benefits and you can use it, but the idea would be to make it very simple. And this is what we are trying to do. A cheat sheet which has 10 steps, it's not exactly a cheat sheet, or it's a cheat sheet for something really complicated. So this is why we try to put everything in this white paper. It's about adopting cloud native for the enterprise. Why? Because Oracle is an enterprise company focused on enterprise customers, and we care a lot about to do the things in the right way, to deploy, to deploy for performance, to deploy for security, and so on, to build code which is going to respond to the highest level of intringency by customers. And we identify 5 stages, and I'm going to go through those 5 stages very quickly, and then we will jump to our example and to our console to see exactly what you have and what you can reuse in order to start exactly to follow this journey, right? So phase number 1, it's about code. It's about putting your code into applications and make the code reusable for microservices, right? And this can be done manually, of course, but again, if you're going to do it in an automatic way, the entire deployment cycle and everything is going to be much faster, and you will be able to achieve faster time to market, right? So phase number one, it's about taking the code and adapting it, put it in containers in order to have it ready for microservices deployment. Second, orchestration observability. We have our code in containers. We need to run those containers somewhere. Those containers need to run with performance, proper performance, and to offer the best experience in the end, right? But when you are having, Bogdan was saying about Netflix, you know how many microservices Netflix has. You need to make sure that you have the right observability and you are able to track what those services and how those services are playing together with, right? So phase number two is about deploying those containers and making sure everything works just fine. Phase number three, how we are going to do that with service proxy and service meshes. This responds to the problem which we are facing with generated by microservices. We don't have one monolith, but we have a bunch of microservices. We need to stick those, to glue those services together somehow. And this is where the space where we have service proxies and service meshes. In our application, we are using Istio, and I'm going to show you exactly what that means and what are the benefits of using a service mesh in your applications. Step number 4, distributed databases and storage. Okay, so we have data, we have applications, but data needs to be stored somewhere. We need a layer in which we are going to save our application and save our data generated by our application. The data should be usable, right? And this is the space when we are talking about distributed databases or accessing data through REST services, or basically making possible to have a microservice architecture together with databases. And databases, if you think about databases, how traditionally are built, they tend to be monolithic, right? You need to adapt this kind of the way you were building monolith applications to become a microservice application. And step number 5, it's something like all the others, because here we have messaging, serverless, and streaming, and so many things like design patterns. If you make the shift from monolith to microservices, you can imagine that you're going to solve some problems, but some others will arise. Things like how those microservices will speak between each other. So we need to rely on dedicated protocols. Serverless has some limitations. Is it a good idea to have always to deploy always in a serverless way? Maybe yes, maybe not. My answer would be it depends a lot on what you are trying to do. And streaming, we have this kind of new workloads in which we need to ingest huge amounts of data, and we need a service which is going to allow us to do that, not only to ingest but also to process in real time, right? So there are a lot of things and design patterns here when we are talking about cloud native. And cloud native, as you've seen, and what Bogdan was explaining, it's a very broad topic, but we need to find a way in which we are going to pick our solutions and to find a way in which we are going to implement those in our applications in an easy way. Of course, you can invest time and explore any open source tools and so on, but there are some tools which are used by the most. It's like a core technology stack, if you want, right? So Kubernetes it's not the only service orchestrator. There are a lot of them, but it's the main one which is used in the industry now, especially for production. So let's go one-to-one through this. I think, Bogdan, this one is yours.
Yes, so 15 seconds. Phase 1, containers and CI/CD. Continuous integration, continuous deployment. Like I tried to describe before, this is a way to automate the cloud native deployments. And here we have the containers part. We have this workflow. So first, developers check in the code in the code repository of their choice. Then this check-in is triggered in phase 2, the build process. And we have here tools like Maven or Gradle for Java, which are building your code. Then in step 3, Docker, based on the Docker file, which is describing how the application should be packaged in a Docker container, are building the container, are compiling them if you want. Step 4, the container image is generated and is pushed to the container registry, which could be Docker registry, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure registry, Azure Container Registry, anything you like, basically, because there are many registry containers available, and it really depends on your cloud provider, use case, I don't know, security constraints, and so on and so forth. And phase 5, the last one, the container is deployed into production as needed, in as many instances as needed. And that's it. It can be done manually in your early days if you just start doing that. But soon an orchestrator like Kubernetes or anything else really will be required, because the number of containers will increase for sure. I mean, if your application is taking off, then the number of containers required will be big, or well, bigger. So that's it. That's phase 1.
Yeah, phase 2.
Back to you, Alex, with phase 2.
Thank you, Bogdan. So phase 1, we put the code into containers, right? Right now, you are going to deploy to production, and you can use something like Kubernetes, but there are many other orchestration systems out there. I was saying Kubernetes is the most popular one, let's say, and is the one better tested in production. But there are a lot of things which you need to handle. So hopefully you are going to be a very successful startup and you will have tens, thousands of customers, right? Imagine that the number of containers, the number of services which are going to be deployed every day is going to increase and increase, and you will need to scale. So you can do that manually, but there are things which you will have to handle, things like provisioning and deployment of the containers, the configuration and scheduling, right? How these containers will change and when they should change, when you should scale it, and so on. How is going to be done the resource allocation, on which servers out of your infrastructure or your data center or whatever you are using, where is going to that container is going to end up and run on. How we ensure that containers are available, and there are so many other things which you need to handle, right? It's one thing to put your code into a developer environment where it runs and you have a microservice running that way. That's perfect. It's phase 1. But in phase 2, we are basically searching for something which is going to take this burden out of us, and we are going to use something like an orchestrator. And we already mentioned Kubernetes. Kubernetes does exactly that, right? Kubernetes is a portable, extensible, open source platform for managing containerized workloads and services that facilitates both declarative configuration and automation. This is the official definition. What Kubernetes does, it allows you to deploy easily in production, and not only production, containers. And Kubernetes is going to be the one who's going to manage all this complexity around deployment. You can roll back the deployment, you can have a canary deployment, and a lot of things like that, and you can do it in a programmatic way. This is very important because with Kubernetes, you can this Kubernetes is an orchestrator which can run in on-prem, it can run in Oracle Cloud as a service, as you will see it, or it can run anywhere where you install the requirements. So you can do it in a programmatic way, and this is going to be handled automatically. This is very important when it comes to orchestration. And orchestration is not enough. You need to make sure that everything works together very nice and cleanly, right? So if you compare it with monolith, of course, we have the agility and we have the elasticity, and there are so many things related as benefits with microservices. But you can see, the technology stack is going to get increased, and it's going to get generated some complexity around building such an application and making sure that everything works perfect together. And there are things like Fluentd for logging, Prometheus again for monitoring, the application, Open Tracing to understand where in your application is. If you're having a problem, you can troubleshoot exactly what is going on. So this would be in phase 2. And yes, after Kubernetes, which was the first CNCF project released, basically, Prometheus was the second one. And the reason why it was the second one was because after deploying containers using Kubernetes, this major problem appeared: how we make sure and how we monitor, that everything works together. And this is why Prometheus is the second project. And of course, you need to visualize it in a simple way. Grafana, right? All the things which I'm mentioning here, I'm not mentioning just because there are interesting technologies which worth be mentioning and may be useful for your technology stack, but it's because in our application and what you're going to see, all these are present, and we will have, if we have the time, we will take a look over all of them. Phase number 3, right? We have a lot of application, and this is the simplest explication for a service mesh. You have a lot of services, all of them needs to work together, right? You don't have a monolith which does the entire job. You have all these kind of microservices distributed. We need to cooperate and we need to achieve the end goal together. But how can you make sure that the communication between them is secure, how you can make it sure that the services are available in the network, how you are going to keep traces of what is going on. And this is what Service Mesh is doing. We already mentioned the Netflix example, Amazon.com, again, a huge e-commerce application. There are a lot of microservices. If you try to troubleshoot something in this big ball of microservices speaking with each other, right? This is going to be a nightmare. This is why you need a service mesh, and Istio comes to picture. And it does it in a very simple way. Why we are talking about service meshes and service proxies? Let's imagine that you would like to make traces of everything. All the packages are moving, or all the communication which is generated by our microservice, right? If you would have to redesign or rewrite your code, that would be a nightmare. This is why we are having this kind of sidecar architecture in which we put a proxy next to our service. And what this proxy allows us to do is to monitor and to encrypt the traffic and do everything without having to intervene over the code, right? This is why a service mesh is really important. And service meshes are not only adopted in a cloud native context. They are being adopted for enterprises in general because it brings with huge advantages. I'm trying to jump through the slides just to get to the juicy part, right? When we're going to go to the demos and to see exactly what you can use in Oracle Cloud. So distributed databases and storage. Data can be distributed. We can have sharded databases and so on. But this kind of approach is not going to be suitable for every use case. So the reason why we are in a unique position is because we have a single database, a fully managed service, which is able to respond to any kind of need for your application. This is why we call Oracle Database a converged database, and it can act as a document DB. It can be as a key value store if you want, an analytical DB if you want to do this kind of reporting over the data generated by your systems. It can be a relational database, graph database. So with Oracle Analytics and with Oracle Database and Oracle Autonomous especially, this is a unique offering which plugs in very well into your cloud native architecture, let's say. It doesn't have to be autonomous. We are going to see that, for example, in Oracle Cloud, we are offering a NoSQL service. We are offering also MySQL as a service, which is very interesting. We are going to take a look over all of those. But again, in phase 4, when you're thinking about a cloud native application, you need to think about how you're going to store the data and make it usable. And again, I think Bogdan already mentioned this. The microservices tends to not be a client-server model, right? They tend to use APIs and services which are exposed to REST APIs most likely. And this database, our Oracle database through Oracle REST Data Services, supports this kind of interaction. You can easily expose the content of a table through an API, which is going to be very easy to be used by these microservices. Okay, and I think we all got to this point when there is a lot of info. The reason why it might be quite demanding is because cloud native itself is a very broad topic. And what is very important for you before jumping to this to the demo part of our session is that me and my team, Bogdan and all the others, we are here for you. You don't have to go through this I don't know, difficult road on your own. We, through Oracle for Startups program, but not only, we are offering not only the credits and the resources for the cloud services which we are going to use, we are also offering the mentorship and the consultancy, let's say, if you want. You can leverage our expertise in order to work together to build something really interesting. And for me at least, and I know for my team as well, we are really eager to do it because I think the most brilliant innovations are coming from the startup space, and we are really happy to work together with you guys. Before jumping to Oracle Cloud Services and what we are offering, do we have any questions? I think, let me check the chat if we have some questions we should like to address now. Or if you want to ask something about what we are already discussing, please feel free to put it into chat now and we will take it. In 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. Igor, you have a question?
Yes, I actually have a question.
Please.
You mentioned a lot of parts, the serverless versus versus actually having the cloud. What would you say is the biggest success case right now for Oracle? I read somewhere that you are actually supporting Zoom and the Zoom
Yeah.
infrastructure for Oracle. Is that one of the bigger cases that you support as an infrastructure?
Yes, Zoom is one of the biggest, one of our biggest customers, and the reason why Zoom chose us is because of our performance, right? Our infrastructure performance. Zoom itself, I mean, they are using microservices for what you have in front of you, the web page, you know, the application itself. If you want to make a poll, for example, that can be built as a microservice. But the video part and the video processing, it's still a monolith. If you want, it still runs in a virtual machine because it needs this kind of, you know, huge power. So Zoom is a very good use case because it uses everything and it leverages serverless, microservices, and the big old monolith, if you want, all together. Right?
Was it built on cloud from the beginning, or it transferred?
It was built with cloud in mind, I would say. I think
I mean Oracle Cloud, sorry.
No. It was built initially, you know, Zoom, I don't have all the details, but Zoom have their own data centers at a certain point. They are using also Amazon, and lately they decided to, when they have this kind of spike and they really needed to provide a lot of performance, they jump into Oracle both, and they are using OCI in order to respond to this huge amount of customers they had in the last year.
Can you explore, because I see here a few companies that are cloud first type of startups. Regarding those spikes and influx of customers at a very single point of time. How is that managed by Oracle services? And maybe you can give an example. Like because usually they have 100, let's say 10,000 of users in a single moment of time, but then in authentication you get 100,000, and then potentially the system kind of gives up.
I think the best way to do it. Oh, please don't make me sign in. I think, Bogdan, we spoke too much. I need to sign in, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I will sign in to my Oracle Cloud account just to show you, for example, how the Oracle Cloud services are built with scalability in mind, right? Our focus is on, you know, using exactly what the customer being able to use whatever they exactly what they need. There is no reason with cloud services to pay extra just in order to be safe, and we accommodate these spikes by allowing customers to have by allowing customers to scale the services based on their needs. There are multiple ways of doing that, but I would like to show you, for example, the Autonomous Database, which is the single service on the market which can scale without any kind of shutting down the service or restart. It can scale the number of resources and the power allocated to that instance. This is just one of the
and
Please.
Alex, we scale also the price, right?
Yeah, and of course
that's very important.
And of course you pay exactly for what you are using. Give me just one second, because again we talk too much and I need to log in. As you see, in Oracle Cloud you have multi-factor authentication. There are a lot of security measures in order to log into your cloud account. Okay, so what I'm doing now, I'm jumping a little bit, you know, through the agenda, but I'm jumping to one of the services just to respond Igor's questions. So for example, I'm going to check here on autonomous transaction processing, one of our databases, right? And this database, first of all, you will see part of what Oracle is offering for free. You can use such databases for free for always without paying anything, right? This database, you can have up to 2 databases for each your cloud account. If you are going to register your own cloud account right now, either if you are a legal entity or a person, you're going to have free resources forever. I think Bogdan is going to present that later. But for example, let's say I'm going to have such a database which is going to be used as a store for the backend of my application, right? If I'm seeing a spike, for example, or if I'm knowing that I'm going to have a spike, for example, with Black Friday, this is something which I can predict. Autonomous database can be easily scaled from one CPU, which means basically I'm going to increase 4 times the performance, or basically the the performance of the database just by giving a click into the console. I can do it in a programmatic way through CLI or API. I can do it directly from the console, or I can decide to activate what is called auto-scaling, right? So auto-scaling will enable my database to grow or shrink in terms of performance and not storage. It can grow or shrink up to 3 times in order to respond to the to the highest peak of customers automatically. You don't need to do anything. When it's going to be a slow, when it's going to be a low workload, let's say, and there are not going to be many transactions on that database, it's going to use the minimum amount of resources. This is just an example. We are doing a lot of things in cloud, and from the architecture, from the services which you are using, there are a lot of things which you can implement in order to keep the costs down. But when you are going to grow, you are going to be able to grow seamlessly without doing anything. Igor, does this respond to your question?
I think it does. I was just curious on how it's structured, but you went a bit further, so thank you very much for that one. And also hoping to get Bogdan's input on the video he was mentioning. He will share with us.
Yeah. Okay, let me go back to the presentation. I have just to introduce the services we have, and then we will see it in the console, right? So in Oracle Cloud, I was saying that we are offering infrastructure platform services, which are basically services with added value, managed services on top of our infrastructure. And we are supporting a huge number of solutions. When it comes to language and frameworks, we are trying to be as open as possible. So starting from the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure part, of course, you can build virtual machines, you can take your applications, deploy it in Oracle Cloud, and here we are doing a lot of amazing stuff in order to differentiate ourselves to other providers like Amazon, Azure, and so on, right? But I think the value, or where we should focus on, especially for this application, is here on the value-added services in the data management part, where we are offering not only ATP and ADW, these are two databases which you can use. NoSQL service, this is a NoSQL database being offered as a service in Oracle Cloud. On top of this, we have MySQL Cloud Service, which is amazing. And on 2nd of September, we announced a breakthrough when it comes to MySQL and the new engine. I think we should, if there are startups interested to use MySQL, we should definitely have a chat to see exactly, why the performance and the price in Oracle Cloud is way, way, way better than any other running it in any other place, on-prem, on your hardware, or in any other cloud provider, especially for the analytical workloads. As you can see, we are supporting basically Python, Java, Node, Ruby. For OCI, we even added a .NET SDK, right? So it's not, even if you are developing in .NET, you can start using our services. And there are a lot of things and services which we are going to see in the console. But moving to the next slide, let's focus on those which are built for building cloud native applications, because we were talking about how you should build it. Okay, let's see what kind of options do you have in Oracle Cloud to build these applications. So Kubernetes, we have Kubernetes service, right? You can use it in Oracle Cloud. I'm going to just highlight some of the key features. In Oracle Cloud, if you are using our Kubernetes service, you are paying only for the infrastructure. So there is no other let's say cost for using it as a service. You are just paying what you use, and this is very important because none of the other service providers are having such a metric. In general, if you are without taking in consideration the discount which comes for your Oracle, if you enroll for Oracle for Startups, we are much aggressive when it comes to pricing. Our prices are really low when it comes to infrastructure and services. If you combine that with the discount you get by enrolling in Oracle for Startups, there is no better solution to run your applications and to run your infrastructure compared with Oracle Cloud. Then we have a Docker repository. So you build a code in phase 1 and you need to store it somewhere, and it needs to be close to where the application is going to run. We have a registry, right, in Oracle Cloud, and we are going to see that where you can store your Docker containers. Here again, you're just going to pay object storage. You're not paying anything else. And when you do the math, and after we will have a chance to discuss with one of the startups to chat and discuss about their use case, you will see that in the end, the costs, if you're going to run in Oracle Cloud, is going to be much cheaper compared with everything else, just because of that. Functions, it's serverless, and you will see exactly, probably in 10 minutes, I'm going to show you how easy it is to deploy a just play with code. This is what function serverless means, right? Care about the code and don't care about the complexity of deploying everything else. We are going to take a look on that. Events, streaming, and API management. These are complementary services, again, if you want to have a cloud native approach in building your application. When it comes to DevOps and services focused on DevOps, here we have a lot of things. For logging, we are going to see how logging works in Oracle Cloud. We are going to check monitoring, to keep an eye on what is currently using in Oracle Cloud, what is the load on several services. This is all native integrated in Oracle Cloud. Notifications, if something goes wrong, because inevitably, we are talking about software. Software happens that sometimes it goes wrong. We need to have a notification. We need to have some alarms in order to have proper management of our infrastructure and our applications. And Visual Builder Studio, if you want to have a complete environment in which you collaborate with your teams to build code, to build documentation, to deploy, to test it, to release it, this is a complete package with with the Kanban, if you want to manage even the project management part of it, how you're going to deploy how you're going to create the code, how you're going to keep track on the tasks and everything. This is a complete environment, another service, a great service which you can use, right? Okay, let's speak only about what we are supporting. So Oracle Cloud is built in order to be as open as possible. This is why we are supporting Node.js. We are supporting a lot of popular programming languages, and we are adding support more and more. But we also support open source, the most known open source tools in the market, things like Ansible or Terraform. We are supporting GitHub, GitLab for code repository and things like that. So if you are already a developer, or if you're already advanced in developing some solutions, I don't know, you can anytime take those things you already built, or take the popular tools you are already using and start using them in Oracle Cloud. The transition will be really easy. And right now, let's jump to the console, because we talked too much. I think we talked too much. I was expecting, someone is going to stop me at a certain point, but yeah, it looks like nobody did. So this is why being, so enthusiastic about something is not always a good thing. So what you have in front of you, it's the main dashboard for Oracle Cloud. As I said, anyone can register an Oracle Cloud account and they will get free resources. Bogdan is going to cover that later after this demo. What you can do with those free resources, those will be always available for you. What you can do, you can host we are talking about 2 virtual machines, 2 databases, and a lot of additional services. So you can do whatever you want with it. You can host your application, you can host your blog. I'm personally hosting my blog there, right? You can install your password manager if you want, or if you are a startup, you can create your web page. You can launch a project using those resources. You can build applications using the free resources which we are which we are giving you, and you can do that in a number of regions. As you can see here, we are present in a lot of geographies. For our territory, the Frankfurt is the best option, because all Frankfurt is somehow like an interconnection node when it comes to internet connection and everything. So we are mostly using Frankfurt for our deployments. But keep in mind, Oracle is offering also cloud in customers' premises if you're going to need such a deployment. And I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to show it to all the services, just going to show you what we have. When it comes to infrastructure, keep in mind we have everything you need to run your existing applications to Oracle Cloud. When it comes to databases, we are offering Oracle databases, of course, in different shapes, sizes. We are supporting physical machines, virtual machines, and so on. We have these autonomous services, which are really interesting, and this is why I'm starting this is what I'm going to do. Autonomous is unique, and this is what we are using in our application. I was talking about this application and the things you can do. Let's take a look at the architecture, right? Why we are saying this is a reference app. First of all, our reference app, what I'm accessing right now, this IP is a public IP coming from Oracle Cloud. These services are deployed in Kubernetes in Oracle Cloud. And you can see they are built, all of them, they are talking with each other in order to achieve what you see in front of you, these e-commerce applications, and they are built in different languages exactly for you, in order for you to, it doesn't matter what kind of programming language you are familiar with, to rely on this one and to check the source code to see exactly what is going on there. And what we have here, how this e-commerce application looks like, is built. Is comprised out of multiple microservices deployed on our Oracle Kubernetes engine, and we are using other services from Oracle Cloud. One of which is this ATP, right? Autonomous Transaction Processing. This is a database service in which you can store data. It's unique in the market right now. This is why we call it autonomous, because it's not only a managed service. So okay, you can provision it. It's going to be provisioned automatically. You just need to click next. That's going to be it. And there are a lot of managed database services on the market right now. What is unique with autonomous is that you don't have access to the operating system. You cannot do anything. The system using artificial intelligence is basically even the performance. It's automatically handled by our machine learning, which is running in the back. So with autonomous database, you just create it and scaling the number of required resources, patching it. This is something which is completely transparent to you as an end user. This is why we are calling it an autonomous system, and it's handled 100% by Oracle, is offered to you as a service, right? And our application is using such an instance in order to store things like user data, catalog data, data from carts, and so on, right? This is one of the services we are having. And again, at the end of this webinar, you will be able to come here. This application is available on GitHub. Let me open the link. OCI, this one. This application is built by us, and it's a reference application for you at the end of this webinar to register your account and start playing with it, right? What you will be able to do is to deploy everything you see here, because we are putting here the source codes for each of the containers. We are giving you the deployments for Kubernetes and everything. This is why I'm saying that we are giving you all the artifacts. And it's even if you're doing it, even if you're playing with Kubernetes or Docker for the first time, we have also documented each step in order for you to do it on your own, right? What you can do is check the documentation, follow it step by step, and I don't know, within 2 or 3 hours, doesn't matter if you're an expert or not, you're going to have your Oracle Cloud account provisioned, you're going to have your application provisioned in Oracle Cloud, and this is going to be a very good foundation for starting to develop cloud native applications. Whenever we get in touch with the startups, trying to understand, what is their need, how they should develop something, we are always using this application as a reference, and this is why we've built it. Of course, we are going to give you the links and everything at the end of the presentation. So getting back to the architecture, let's see what we have here. We have a database, which is a managed service, right, used to store data. But we also have, for example, a bucket, right? Why we have this object storage bucket is because we have static content, like the pictures we have here, right? This content is being served, all the pictures, all the icons it's being served from an object storage. So the microservices are not keeping the images itself. They are just relying on the data which is stored in the object storage. And this is what you can see here. We have a media service which serves this static content to all the other services. And we also have a function. This is a serverless function. So whenever a customer would like to subscribe, for example, for our newsletter, it's an e-commerce application. You can subscribe for the newsletter. Whenever you're going to subscribe, this function is going to store the data in the database, registering the email of the customer, and is going to send an email using another service, reference service which we have. It's called email service in Oracle Cloud. So this is why we are talking about this application. There are a lot of things here which put together, they are following all the best practices when it comes to developing cloud native apps. Going back to the console, we've seen the autonomous transaction processing. What else? We have MySQL database. And again, if you are planning to use MySQL in your deployments, in building your application, this is going to be a killer offering because of the price and the performance and the capabilities it has. But in Oracle Cloud, there are so many other solutions, right? We are not talking about Kubernetes and so on. We have data catalog in case you want to understand what kind of data is being generated in your applications. We have data flow, which allows you to build a real-time program using Apache Spark to analyze huge amounts of data in real time. We have analytics, resource discovery, and there are so many others, but sadly I'm not going to be able to go through all of them because I think we are short on time, right? Igor, how are we? How much time do we have?
I would not like to say 3 minutes, but
Okay.
I would like to say not more than 15, so we don't extend it too much.
Okay.
The session that we are planning.
Okay, then let's do it in 10, and I'm not going to keep this in mind. If you're interested to speak up more about this, you can always reach us and work together and get into all the details. You know, at the end of the session, you will get all the instructions how to register an Oracle Cloud account, how you can get started with everything you've seen here. And I would ask Bogdan to just explain what Oracle Free Tier is and what it includes. So in order for you to understand what kind of options do you have after this session, right? When it comes to working with Oracle.
Thanks, Alex. I will go very quickly through this, although it's kind of important for us as developers, because testing a cloud provider, the technology that's behind, it's very dependent on the free access they provide. And I think Oracle is providing now a very robust free tier. And I'm very pleased with that, because when this become available, I personally move my my side projects from other cloud provider into this free tier, because it's really comprehensive. I mean, you have two kind of resources. First, you have your free trial, your usual free trial that is more or less the same with every cloud provider. You have some free credits and you have 30 days to consume that, right? But there are also other kind of services that are always free. So we have some kind of, a selected batch of cloud services that will be always free, not for 30 days, not for 1 year, but forever. So if you have a small project, it can run there for free. So Alex, if you could go to the next page with the. So what's included in the always free kind of resources, which are, by the way, available for everyone. So if you want to try something, if you want to host something like a web page, a blog, something, it could stay as well there for free for a long time, right? So first we have two autonomous databases with 20 gigabytes of storage each, which is quite interesting. So if you want to play with autonomous, or if you want to build a small application on it, even in production, you can do it. It will take you a long way, until you have to pay something. If your application is really taking off and you're successful, only then it will make sense to pay at some point. Because again, two databases, 20 gigabytes each, quite a lot. Also, two very small VMs with 1 gigabyte memory each, which is quite perfect for building a small application, I don't know, a blog, website. So that's good. And then storage, which is okay, I think, in terms of capacity. You get a load balancer for free, and 10 terabyte outbound traffic, which is more than other cloud providers are, providing with payment. So again, if you build something, like a startup application, you could start with the free tier as well. So that will take you a long way. And of course, you have monitoring, notification, and everything you need to keep track of the usage.
Bogdan, I think we've lost you.
Yeah, I don't hear him as well.
Okay, let me, in order to sum it up, what I would like, after this very long webinar in which we talked a lot, two main things. We have a reference application. If you're going to build an application which is going to be cloud native, and you want to have something which is going to put all the best practices together and to use it as an example, we have MuShop, and you can test that out in Oracle Cloud using either the free tier version and the always free resources Bogdan was showing. And in case this has nothing to do with you being a startup. You can either be a person, you can be a professionist, you can be a database administrator, you can just be someone who's looking to learn more about what cloud means, right? If you're combining this one with Oracle for Startups, which gives you a 70% discount for the credits you are going to use, plus technical consultancy, plus some credits for free in order to spin up your environments, plus the marketing and all the other benefits which were already presented, I think this becomes a killer offering. And don't forget, you can always chat with us, get in touch with us to understand how we can help you in order to deploy the next big thing, right?
If there is any question, I believe I saw a question in the chat, and Bogdan and Ermin kind of addressed it. It was regarding moving existing cloud infrastructure from different cloud providers to AVS. Maybe you can, Bogdan, just finalize it in a short sentence and say to everyone that if they want to use whatever it was presented here, it's included in the Oracle for Startups program, and they can apply it right away. And we'll of course share all the details and presentation from today's session to them. Bogdan, with you and Alex, just final note, and then we'll finalize the session.
Well, first, thank you for being here. We have a lot of things to discuss here. We kind of, prepared an iPhone application, to access the free tier autonomous database, and show you how easy it is to build a top tier mobile application using, Oracle Cloud as a backend. But unfortunately, we're way out of time. But maybe we'll, if there is interest, just ping us and we'll do something specifically for you. We can virtually meet and look at the possibilities. So thank you for being here, and looking forward to engage with you if you feel like it.
Okay, and one last thing for me: if you don't perceive the Oracle before, as a cloud power horse, we are working close with not only startups, companies, and so on, but focusing especially on startups. And we have a lot of projects even in our geographical region in order to scale and to drive success together, right? So don't be a stranger, get in touch with us, and we are more than ready and willing to help, right?
Amazing. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Bogdan. All of you that have anything, I believe, will share your details into the email with this recording, so you can come back and review it in your own time. I would like to welcome you all and thank you for today's participation. But we have another very interesting third session next week, next Wednesday, the same time, 3 p.m. So it will be more on growth and how to leverage Oracle's contacts and everything that offers part of Oracle for Startups in order to grow. We have very interesting 2 startups that have started from this region with founders and created interesting applications based on Oracle, so that you can bring your technology to the world. Thank you very much to all of you, and see you next week. Alex, Bogdan, everyone, once again, pleasure to have you.
All the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.